We'll select this low poly head and add the multi-resolution modifier to it. There are 3 levels you can view multi-res at: viewport, sculpt, and render. By default, no levels have been added, so you cannot toggle to higher levels of subdivision just yet. I'll turn off optimal display for the moment and add a few subdivisions by clicking the subdivide button here. We are now able to dial back the viewport subdivisions to anything below 3, the maximum we've currently set. I'll set each subdivision level to a different setting so we can see when the difference becomes relevant to a sculpting workflow. I'll toggle into camera view and re-enable optimal display. This overlays the original low polygon wireframe over the subdivision surface. You'll be able to faintly see the subdivided faces. Let's disable it once more so we can see each level clearly. I'll toggle into sculpt mode now. You'll notice how the resolution is subdivided at a higher count than when we were in object mode. Now I'll bring up a render in which I composited the denser wireframe so you can see how the render setting is even higher again. Back in viewport, I'm going to set my sculpt setting to 3 and toggle back into sculpt mode. We won't go too deep into sculpt settings, but it is important to point out a few things while we're here. For example, I've set the mirror function to X and I've set the sculpt draw radius to 50. Now when I draw on the surface, the mesh will be deformed on both sides of the X-axis. If we toggle back into object mode, because the viewport level is still set to 1, the deformation will also be shown, but with reduced resolution. By disabling the viewport preview, you can see that the original mesh can still be seen without any sculpting done to it. This is because, by default, the sculpt base mesh is not enabled. I'll enable it now and sculpt another area of the mesh. I'll disable the viewport preview once more, and you'll see that these areas have affected the base mesh, whereas the previous areas have not. If you set all your subdivisions lower and hit delete higher, this gets rid of anything above the subdivision you just set. There are a couple of options for subdividing higher resolutions of a base mesh. You'll notice that there's a few options for adding a resolution of subdivision. There's the main subdivide button, but there are 2 smaller buttons below it, simple and linear. You can think of the main subdivide button as using the standard Catmull-Clark subdivision algorithm. Both simple and linear are much like the simple subdivision method, in which you can add extra topology but not necessarily smooth the edges. They are, however, slightly different. To illustrate how, I've got this basic cube with a multi-resolution modifier added to it, and I've given it 1 level of subdivision. I'll duplicate this cube a couple of times, and on the first duplicate, I'll add a simple level of subdivision, and on the second duplicate, I'll use linear. You can immediately see the difference. Applying simple or linear as a first level of subdivision and adding a further subdivision on top of this will create a slightly different result, as that subdivision is working on the extra topology that has just been generated. If we were to apply this modifier to the mesh, we could still restore the levels of subdivision in reverse by reapplying the multi-res modifier and then using the unsubdivide button. I can hit the unsubdivide button for each level we wished to restore, but you have to note that you cannot restore more levels than were previously available. There's also an option to transfer the sculpted information from one mesh to another. On the left, I have a head mesh that has some sculpting done to it after a multi-res modifier was added. And on the right, we have a head mesh with only the multi-res modifier added, but no sculpting done. I'll select the left head, then shift select the unsculpted head on the right. I can now hit the reshape key, and all of the sculpting detail is transferred. If I select the head on the right and hit apply base, this will deform the base mesh to fit the higher resolution sculpt. You can see that the head on the right has not had any sculpting applied to its base mesh. It is sometimes handy to save sculpt information externally to the blend file that you're working in. This can save a lot of hassle, especially if your file will take a long time to load. This base mesh has not been modified, and the sculpt is only present when the modifier is viewable. I'll click on Save External under the Generate section. This will open a Save dialog box, and I can save this sculpt data in an exterior file, which this mesh will reference. I can also return that data to the blend file by clicking on Pack External.